Hey, what's going on, guys? It's Kevin Zwicker from Fast Count coming at you, and this is the first edition of the Dynamite post show for the channel. And I'm sorry it's taking later than I expected. I was busy watching the Knicks choke against the Indiana Pacers in the Eastern Conference Finals, which I'm sure is going to haunt me for the rest of my life. But this was the go-home show for Double or Nothing. As we all know, it's taking place this weekend, the same night as Saturday night's main event. So it's going to be a very hectic weekend when it comes to covering these events for the channel. But going into the show, you knew what the main talking points were going to be, and you knew what was going to be the main focus of the show. It was going to be promoting the Owen Hart Cup tournament finals for both the men and the women. And it was going to be the ceremony officially making MJF a member of the Hurt Syndicate. Now, going into the show, it started off with Hangman and Will Ospreay, two of the guys who have been one of the main driving forces of the pickup and quality of AEW Dynamite for the last several weeks. I've said it on multiple different occasions, whether it's on the shorts or it's the longer form videos. I believe that Drew McIntyre and Hangman Adam Page are probably the two most interesting characters in all of professional wrestling. And obviously, Will Ospreay is in the discussion for one of the best in-ring wrestlers in the world at the moment. So it's going to be a very much so a pick-em when it comes to who is going to win the Owen final between these two guys this weekend. And they started off the show kicking off with a promo, which is very unusual for Dynamite, but for these two guys, it feels as if they made an exception. You had the ring surrounded by security, and you had Will Ospreay come out and says, guys, I promise we're not going to get physical. This is going to be pretty cordial. All you security guys, I'll make sure that you get paid. You can go to the back because it's not going to be that type of deal, right? And you have Ospreay ask Hangman, like, hey, man, do you still drink? And you see Hangman kind of look as if he's offended, but he says, all these past couple of weeks, you kind of hit my head here, kind of did this there. I just want to have a drink with you. They pull out some beers. Will Ospreay drinks it. Hangman's kind of, confused as to what's going down. The story that they've been telling with the tagline, the ascension versus the redemption. Hangman, he's kind of been this loose cannon. Ever since he started feuding with Swerve Strickland, we can all go back to all the crazy incidents that's happened between those two guys, especially in their steel cage match that went down last All Out, where you saw Hangman get a syringe where he poked it into Swerve's mouth. That was probably one of the more gruesome things I've seen in a while when it comes to a wrestling ring. Before getting further, guys, please remember to hit the like button and subscribe if you haven't. But they're talking, and you see Will, he's bringing up all these hardships, that's going down with him in his life. As you guys all know, it's very infamous and out there due to the fact that Triple H made a comment about Will running away from the grind. Will has been very public about how the fact that he doesn't want to move to the US. He still resides in the UK. He has a stepson and a missus there. So he travels back and forth through the UK and to the US multiple times throughout the month to go to Dynamite. He's bringing up, he's like, man, all these different weeks, most Tuesdays, I don't get a lick of sleep. I got my family back home. The AEW title hasn't been shown in several months. I've been somebody who's really been on the rise in this company, which is true. It's always felt as if it's when, not if, Will Ospreay is going to become the AEW champion. And he's basically saying that, man, I'm doing this to show the gold to the world. If you guys haven't been paying attention, ever since AEW has been simulcasted on Max, there's been people who probably started watching Dynamite who have no idea what the championship looks like due to the fact that Moxley has it in a bag constantly, right? So he talks about how he wants to show that off and how he wants the title and all that. And Hangman kind of just goes off and he says, man, you want the title. I need the title. For this past 2 years, I've been on kind of this downward spiral. I've been having moments where my kids want to play with me. I'm kind of in and out in their lives, and I'm just staring out of a window because I'm just basically on a whole nother planet. My mind is somewhere else, right? And he's saying all these differences between them. While Will wants the title, Hangman needs the title, and he needs the title because he wants to see if there is a light at the end of this dark tunnel. Some hard-hitting stuff, right? And they announced during this segment that Will Ospreay said that he petitioned Tony Khan that this is going to be the main event of the show, which It's crazy, right? Because this is the same show that's going to have Anarchy in the Arena on it. And you know those are always some very crazy and hectic matches. And the fact that Will Ospreay and Hangman are going to main event the show really is going to put the pressure on these two guys to deliver. It is any two individuals on this roster, though, that I think can handle that pressure. It's going to be these two guys. I expected this match to be phenomenal. I expect that these two guys are really going to be able to show off what they're able to do. And the fact that they're able to have these very personal and very intimate promos between these two guys is really building up to this match, adding more hype than there already was. You already expected it to be a great one. And when you add an interesting layer to the story, it makes it a little bit more interesting, right? So it's a thumbs up segment in my mind. I enjoyed it immensely, right? Next, we're moving on to the first match of the night, and it is this all-star triple six-man tag match. You got the Bucks and Jon Moxley versus Swerve Strickland and the Ops, Samoa Joe and Powerhouse Hobbs. And this was a showcase of the Bucks. You know, the Bucks are two guys who really get a bad rap. You know, they're very divisive. Whether you enjoy their matches or not, there really isn't an in-between. It's kind of you're in love with what they do or you consider it gymnastics, right? But they really seem to turn it on in this match. The Bucks, ever since they've turned to these, you know, evil EVP characters, they really have kind of toned down their athletic style. And you kind of expect that, right? People kind of give them shit about it, but when you're heels, the job isn't for you to do these crazy moves for people to go like, oh my gosh, that was badass, right? The main objective for a heel is for you to dislike them and boo them. So when they break it down like that, it makes sense as to why they cut down on the athletic maneuvers that they're used to doing and that people are used to seeing. But I think they very worked to a vintage Young Bucks style in this matchup. Swerve was getting works at the majority of this match, as you guys probably know. Swerve is basically the team captain for this team AEW versus the Death Riders Anarchy in the arena match. So it would make sense that he'd be the guy who spends the majority of the in-ring time. Powerhouse Hobbs looked good as well. Powerhouse is somebody who it's kind of stop and go with him. There's a lot of times where he's portrayed as this very strong and very powerful character. And then there's other times where he kind of feels as if he's this background player, basically like furniture, right? I think the fact that you got guys like Wardlow gone, you know, whether it's an injury or they just don't plan on using him at the moment, you have Miro gone, it's really opened up a spot for him to be that predominant big man that they try to put all of their creative force behind. Tony, as we all know, isn't the strongest when it comes to booking the big man. But I feel like with this match, that Powerhouse Hobbs, the way that he was able to display his power and the way that they were able to showcase him in a very positive light, I think that that was pointing into the right direction. You had the baby faces win, but after that, all hell broke loose. You had Mina get involved. You had Gabe Kidd get involved. You had Kenny Omega get involved. Always good to see Kenny. I'm glad to see he's doing well and healthy. It just really was trying to pump up and pump the excitement up for Anarchy in the arena, which I think this was a productive segment to do that. This was also pretty enjoyable. I think at the end of the day, we're going to go with the Death Riders to win that match. I know that's not the best and the most, response that people want to hear, but I think that's what we're going to get. And I think the return of Darby Allin is pretty imminent, but let's see, right? The guy just got done climbing Mount Everest, so who knows, right? Next, we get a backstage segment where you've seen the Hurt Syndicate get interviewed. And before I get into this video, guys, please remember to hit the like button and subscribe if you are not already subscribed, right? So you have MVP. He's coming out here. He's addressing the contract signing that is going to go down with MJF joining the Hurt Syndicate. He has his law representative on his side. And you see MJF coming out with this very, very eye-opening suit. It had like these gold designs on it and stuff. I know a lot of people, they were online and they were doing all these different edits of the suit that MJF is going to be rocking, having it be like an African colorway or a Pan-African colorway, because as we all know, MJF is pretty much the Owen in this nation for AEW, right? So he comes out very happy. He's over there with smart Mark Sterling. He has their legal guys working out with their legal guys. and everything is going to be set up for the in-ring segment of the introduction of MJF and the Hurt Syndicate. You have all of them go out to the ring. They're in Albuquerque, New Mexico, and they're basically healing on the whole crowd. You had MVP spit out lines like, this place doesn't even have a good sports team because nobody wants to be here. And then you had MJF and MVP basically double teaming on the crowd, and you had MVP spit out things like, you guys are paid to see me here. I'm being paid to be here. There's a difference. And they just did everything that they possibly could to get as much heat as they could. And it was very entertaining. And you had MJF come out with probably the line of the night. And I hope I don't butcher it, right? He says, my mom once told me that the best moment of your life is finding the love of your life. But obviously, that dumb bitch never had a chance to join the Hurt Syndicate, which is that's just classic MJF, right? And while we're getting all the contracts signed and everything, you had the Sons of Texas interrupt them. If you don't know, it will be the Sons of Texas versus the Hurt Syndicate at Double or Nothing for the Tag Team Championship. And I don't blame you if you don't know, because they were a part of that match that was blacked out on Collision, where the show stopped 30 minutes early. How embarrassing, right? For that to happen. You have Dustin Rhodes doing all the talking, and he is saying all of these things. Brandon, good evening, Kevin. What's going on, Brandon? You doing all right? It's been a long night, right? Crazy long night. I'm glad that you're here, buddy. And it's just been, you had Dustin come out here, and he tells MJF that he hates his guts. And he keeps bringing up the fact that, him and Sammy Guevara are day one AEW guys. The first ever Double or Nothing, Dustin obviously had a big-time match on there with his brother Cody Rhodes. And he's just talking about all the grinding that he's had to do, all of these different, ways that he needed to get to where he's at right now in AEW, and how at Double or Nothing, him and Sammy Guevara are going to beat the Hurt Syndicate. Obviously, I don't see that happening. I think the Hurt Syndicate, ever since that they've gone from WWE to AEW, they've really had a good opportunity to really broaden their horizons. It felt like, during the COVID era in WWE, the Hurt Syndicate, or the Hurt Business at the time, they really were one of the more shining stars of that era. And that era is really hard to really look back on, right? I don't think many people look back and watch events from that era, but if you ever have the time and are ever curious, check it out, because for that short period of time in WWE, it felt like they were kind of the MVPs. They were kind of broken up before they were really able to really do anything. In AEW, they've been able to get the chance to do it. They've been able to shine. I'm very curious as to where this direction is going to head between them and MJF, because I think at the end of the day, I think we all can agree that MJF is going to turn on them at some point. MJF is a snake. He says he's a snake. He is a guy who goes under CM Punk's learning tree. Shout out Chris Jericho. And he learned from him. So obviously, that's something that we can see going down the line, right? Next, we get a backstage segment with Okada. And it's made official at Double or Nothing. We are going to see Okada versus Speedball Mike Bailey. We've seen different teases between these two guys, mainly over on Collision. And think about this. The amount of money that Okada gets paid, right? And the amount of screen time that he's on the main show doesn't really add up, right? Because it's very, very rare that we see an Okada match on Dynamite. And it's even more rare that we see a Continental title defense on Dynamite from Okada. This is why I'm hoping that the rumors of the merging between Kenny Omega's title and Okada's title is true, or what's going to happen at All In, because there really isn't a point to have that title that Okada has throughout the year. And they want to boost up this Continental Classic and make it as if it's the same thing as the G1 and as prestigious as the G1. But I don't believe that it could possibly be that way if what the prize you get of winning that tournament is a title that is barely on TV. It doesn't add up, right? The prestige levels of the two doesn't really mix. But he makes it official. We're going to see Okada versus Mike Bailey. Okada says, I'm the champ. Mike Bailey called me out, but I'm the one who does the calling out, and we're going to make this thing official. He teases his signature bitch line, but he doesn't say it, which was a heel move by him. But that's going to be a good match regardless of the lack of storytelling behind it. I know that in an ideal world, every single match that is on a card has these long and vast, stories behind them. But with AEW, it's been pretty much shown from the beginning that not every single match is going to have this vast, long storyline. I think that's the main difference between their pay-per-views and WWE's PLE. WWE's PLE have, 5 matches tops, and all of them have these intricate stories. The way that they're able to stretch those shows and turn them to 3-4 hour shows with those little amount of matches always, never really ceases to amaze me that they're able to do that. But that's what they do, right? Then we have Bowens versus Ricochet. And if you've seen anything I've ever done, I've stated that Ricochet is probably the best heel in all of professional wrestling at the moment. His persona that he's been able to show of this geeky, nerdy guy who's just always annoying, and he does the Jadakiss laugh, and he's really been able to really just form his own and really break out in AEW. I think this is one of the better signings that AEW has had in recent memory. Out of all the former WWE guys that they've signed in the last year, this is obviously the best one. I think that his feud with Swerve was obviously very good. I think that his match that he's going to have with Mark Briscoe at Double or Nothing is going to be good. If you don't know, they have a stretcher match set up that's going to be taking place at the pay-per-view this weekend. But this match, Ricochet pulled out all the heel tricks that you could think of. The interacting with Billy Gunn, the teasing that he's about to do a DX crop chop, the poking him in the chest, but cowering when Billy Gunn was going to swing on him. All these different dirty taxes that he had throughout this match with Bowen. The way that this match ends with Ricochet gets tossed out of the ring. Bowens is trying to bring him back in there, but Ricochet stabs him with the scissors, the same scissors that he made a bloody mess with Swerve Strickland during their feud. He picks up the win. He's showboating on the ramp, but Mark Briscoe comes out with a stretcher, hits him in the back with a stretcher, tries to load him up on that stretcher, but Ricochet rolls out when Mark Briscoe is on top of the rope, teasing a frog splash. Next, we have Stokely Hathaway coming out. He's cutting a promo on behalf of FTR. He's announcing that on tomorrow they are going to do a contract signing for their match at Double or Nothing. If you don't know, FTR is going up against Nigel McGuinness, who is somebody they have been targeting for the last several weeks on Collision, and he is teaming up with Daniel Garcia. Nigel McGuinness is somebody who doesn't wrestle on a weekly basis or even on a semi-regular basis, but if you don't know, is an ROH legend. His story, there's a documentary, the name of it slips my mind, but it's very telling, and it's very kind of sad because, him and Danielson, obviously they've been linked for so long, and they were both supposed to go to WWE at the same time, but he ended up contracting hepatitis, and just they rescinded the offer. It's just sad, watching a documentary when you see somebody who's, worked so hard to get to a certain level, but just had it ripped from your hands that closely is sad. But we're going to get that match at Double or Nothing. Anytime you can see Nigel get back into the ring, I think that's a good thing. Guys, if you haven't, like the video and subscribe. It helps the channel out in more ways than you even know. I'm going to be back here live for Double or Nothing, the post show. Probably talk a little bit about Saturday night's main event as well, since it's going to be kind of a hybrid show, mainly just us kicking it, talking about the show. We have the 2 last segments of the show were by the ladies. We had the sit-down segment between Jamie Hayter and Mercedes Moné. Then we had the main event match between Mina versus Julia Hart. It was nice to see the ladies back-to-back segments close out the show. It feels like a lot of times in professional wrestling, and a lot of times, especially in AEW, that it feels like they put one women's segment on the show, kind of like, here, damn, like we're kind of like filling up this quota. But the way that they presented Mercedes, and it feels as if Mercedes kind of always has a stroke around there. They started with this, And you had the sit-down segment. The story they're trying to tell is Jamie Hayter is this underdog going up against this undefeated, machine in Mercedes. As we all know, Mercedes Moné is a double champion now, was a triple champion, but she lost to New Japan Strong title in a multi-women match. So she's down to just 3 titles. It's 2 titles technically with 3 belts. Kind of confusing, right? But it is what it is. And Jamie is talking about how, if you remember, Jamie was a former AEW Women's Champion, something that Mercedes Moné has never been. But coming off of that back injury that she had that took her out of action for so long, she's this underdog against Mercedes. And she starts running down Mercedes, like, I'm not this, I'm not that. I'm not a CEO. I'm not somebody who has, is on this pedestal like you are. I've kind of gotten it out the mud. And then Mercedes comes back with basically saying things that you already would expect her to say, right? How she's the Beyonce of the women's division, how she's not looking past Jamie Hayter, she's looking through Jamie Hayter, and all of these different things, and how at Double or Nothing, she's obviously going to come out victorious. This ends up with a brawl between the two where Jamie Hayter lays Mercedes Moné out. When segments end like that, where somebody is standing tall, my wrestling fan ears start poking up, and it starts to make me think as if the person who got laid out is it's a tall tale sign that that person is going to win. Going into this match, I thought Mercedes was going to win regardless, so I'm more confident in that pick as we go further along. Guys, if you don't remember, Collision is going to be on tomorrow and not Saturday like it usually is. I'm thinking about possibly going live then too. Not 100%. Gonna check out what's going on then. But yeah, Tony Storm. Tommy. Who's Tommy, right? It's a late night, right? I just witnessed the Knicks rip my heart out my chest, so my mind's all discombobulated. That was a brutal fucking loss, if you guys seen that, by the way. So main event the show with Mina versus Julia Hart. You had Tony Storm on commentary. Tony Storm is obviously as entertaining as all hell. She's on commentary, doing her best. All these different innuendos and all these different jokes, catching everybody off balance, kind of cracking, the guys who are there. It was just interesting to see. Julia is obviously somebody who is very much one of the up-and-coming wrestlers on the show, former TBS champion, but she's going up against Mina, who has her match up against Tony at Double or Nothing. So coming into this match, I don't think it was that hard to predict that Mina was going to win, because you want her to come across as strong as she possibly can going into the pay-per-view against Tony. So she picks up the win on a backslide reversal. Julia doesn't like that. She starts attacking Mina. Mina hooks her up in the figure 4, and she is kicked in the head by none other than Sky Blue. A returning Sky Blue, who we saw last week. It is a 2-on-1 affair between those two ladies and Mina. Tony Storm eventually comes in and breaks it up. They clear the ring. Tony and Mina have the stare off. They're doing a tug of war for the championship. And the show ends with Mina looking strong, hooking up a figure 4 on the ring post to Tony Storm. And that's how we end the show. When it comes to go-home shows, the objective of that is to get you more excited about the pay-per-view, right? And to get you at a point where if you don't know if you're going to check out the show or pay for the show, this is what's supposed to entice you to make up your mind and purchase the show. And I think that they did a pretty solid job in doing that. I think that the key matches that are on the show that people were going to be interested in regardless, Hangman and Will Ospreay, Anarchy in the Arena, the cup final between Mercedes and Jamie, I think that they did a lot of and put a lot of good effort into putting a lot of sauce on those matches to where people would be interested in. I know I'm interested in, but at the end of the day, I was going to buy the show regardless because I make content, right? Let me know what you guys think, man. Did you guys check out the show? Did you not see the show? Are you just hearing me talk about the show? And did you watch the Knicks lose? Therese Halliburton, man. Fucking Halliburton. Brutal. But anyways, guys, This was a quick show. I'm going to be getting out of here. Like I said, tomorrow night might be back for Collision since it's on Thursday and not Saturday this week, but I am for sure going to be live for Double or Nothing for a post show on there. We could talk a little Saturday night's main event as well if you are going to be more preoccupied with that than the AEW show. But like the video, subscribe if you haven't. Guys, I am Kevin Zwicker. I'm out.